Why, hello there, everybody. We made it to the first Thursday of January. Not just any January, but January the 6th. 1 year of the anniversary of the murder of Ashli Babbitt. Ashli Babbitt was a protester, a peaceful protester of the January 6th Capitol unlawful entry. It's the best thing I could come up with because it's not an insurrection. It wasn't a riot. It wasn't a lawful assembly. It was more like an unlawful assembly to the extreme. But she was the only person that was actually shot, and she was shot by a cop. But this is the 1 year anniversary of her death. So, I do support defunding the cop that shot her. Unfortunately, the cop will have no charges, unfortunately. That's right. Remember January 6th Capitol deaths? From Brian Sicknick to Ashli Babbitt. From Newsweek. I think the only person that's died was Ashli Babbitt. But let's go ahead and read this. January 6, 2022 marks the 1 year anniversary of the U.S. Capitol Police murdering Ashli Babbitt, which saw unlawful entry or protesters breached the security and entered the building. The attack saw the murder of one person and several deaths. No, I don't think any police officers were killed, but let's go ahead and see what Newsweek says. The incident also saw former President Donald Trump be impeached by the House of Representatives on charges of inciting insurrection, becoming the country's first ever president to be impeached twice. Unfortunately, the House impeaches and the Senate prosecutes and punishes, and the Senate found him not guilty on both charges. The January riot victims, and you know it wasn't a riot. Here we are to remember those who lost their lives following the January 6th unlawful entry, unlawful assembly, but it wasn't a riot. It sickens me to call this a riot when there were buildings caught on fire, burnt down to the ground. Cities were terrorized by the likes of Black Lives Matter. The actual terrorist groups, Antifa and BLM, burned down cities to the ground. But yet, we have a mostly peaceful protest, and it's being considered the worst thing to happen since Pearl Harbor. Since 9/11. No, I think people upset, burning infrastructure down to the ground, robbing people, beating people up across the United States, and no one bats an eye. But yet this was not a riot. Sideneck, who joined the Capitol Police in 2008, was injured while physically engaging with protesters on the Capitol, according to the police statement at the time. The 42-year-old Iraq war veteran died the following day after collapsing upon returning to his division office. The medical examiner for Washington, D.C. said Sicknick, who suffered 2 strokes, died of natural causes. Wonk, wonk, wonk. Your story here falls apart. The 2 men arrested for allegedly assaulting Sicknick during the protests by spraying chemical irritant into his eyes and face. The officer's family released a statement on his death January 11th, describing him as a lovely, humble soul. He loved his job with the U.S. Capitol Police and was very passionate about it. He also had incredible work ethic and was very serious about showing up to work on time and refused to call out sick unless absolutely necessary, the statement said. Ashli Babbitt, the 35-year-old military veteran that was murdered by a law enforcement officer while entering the speaker's lobby inside the Capitol, she began climbing through a broken window Babbitt was shot in the left shoulder by an officer who fired once blindly into the crowd. She later died from an injury. Her death was ruled a homicide. Now, keep in mind, homicide is just death by Washington, D.C. Chief Medical Examiner. In a statement last April, the U.S. Attorney Office in Washington, D.C. said an investigation into the murder found insufficient evidence to support a criminal prosecution against the officer who murdered Babbitt. He should have been fired because he just shot into the crowd. Just shot into the crowd. The only person to fire a gun was that officer. Statement says there is no evidence to establish beyond a reasonable doubt that an officer willfully committed an unlawful act of killing Ms. Babbitt. Terry Robert, an attorney representing the Babbitt family, rejected the Department of Justice decision that Robert stated at the time the actual evidence is this officer shot an unarmed woman. It was not an immediate threat to him or any member of Congress. That is inconsistent with any claim of self-defense or defense of others, period. I think that's the cop that shot her. It's a terrible day. Don't get me wrong. Kevin Greason, the 55-year-old Alabama native and a father of 5, was speaking to his wife on the phone when he fell onto the sidewalk during the Capitol protests. According to his family, while Greason was a Trump supporter, he was not there at the Capitol to participate in the entering of the Capitol, nor did he condone such actions. He died of natural causes from hypertensive erythroelastic cholesterol disease, according to the medical examiner, so it looks like he had a heart attack. Benjamin Phillips, according to the Philadelphia Inquirer, Phillips was a 50-year-old computer programmer from Ringtown, Pennsylvania, who founded a pro-Trump website. He drove a van of fellow supporters to Pennsylvania to Washington, D.C., the local newspaper reported. Phillips also died of natural causes from, a heart attack, hypertensive cholesterol disease. Roseanne Boland, according to her family, Boland was among the protesters at the Capitol, aspired to be a sobriety council, and followed QAnon conspiracies. The death of the 34-year-old Georgia native who died from acute time intoxication was ruled an accident by the Washington, D.C. medical examiner. I have no clue what this is. Let's find out. Abuse, overdose associated with significant negative impact of... I have no clue. Go ahead and see what this is. Severe abuse, widespread overdose associated with significant negative impacts of collective neurological systems. Patients may present with psychiatric or medical problems that may include seizures. Patients need aggressive support in a quiet environment with close monitoring. Really? This is a thing? Anyways, Howard Libengood was among the 4 police officers who died by suicide following the insurrection. It's not an insurrection, but he killed himself. The 51-year-old took his own life 3 days after the protests. Official cause of death was not announced, but according to his widow, the officer was sleep-deprived in the days following the protests. He took his own life at home after a work shift. Family attorney also confirmed his death was by suicide. The Crypt Creeper House Speaker Nancy Pelosi tweeted at the time, Officer Howard Libengood was the patriot who dedicated his life to defending the Capitol and protecting all who served, worked in and visited this temple of our democracy. Former U.S. Secretary John Kerry paid homage to Libengood, who used to guard the door near his office. The former presidential nominee tweeted at the time how he always had a smile on his face, but it was also showed great care for the safety of the young staff who worked behind our doors. Jeffrey Smith. Smith was the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department, also died by suicide after the Capitol protests. During the protest, a 35-year-old officer was struck by a metal pole thrown by protesters that hit his helmet and face shield. His wife, Erin, told the Washington Post last February that her husband wasn't the same in the days following the protests. Smith was given a short medical leave but was told to return to work despite his wife later saying that he was considerable physically and emotional pain. He took his own life on January the 15th. There's a few more. Gunther Hashida, the 43-year-old officer, was assigned to the emergency response team within Special Operation Division that helped secure the Capitol on January 6. The police department spokesperson told CNN last August. Married with 3 children, Hashida was a week away from celebrating his birthday when he took his own life last July following the Capitol protests. I'm wondering what's going on. Why are they committing suicide? Last August, the Washington Post reported unnamed official familiar with the investigation of Hashida's death said that the officer struggled beyond the January 6th that could have played a role into his suicide. Kyle D. Freytag. The officer was found dead on July 10th last year, and the department confirmed he died by a suicide. According to the police, the 26-year-old officer helped enforce a curfew that was in place after the protests stormed the Capitol. According to the obituary, the officer enjoyed hiking, camping, riding his motorcycle, as well as traveling and playing the drums, and always knew the best places to eat. The Freytag was described as a kind person with a quick wit and a great sense of humor, the obituary said. The press briefing on August 3rd last year, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki circle back, honored Hashida and the Freytag. I want to take a moment to recognize the passing of the Metropolitan Police Officer Gunther Hashida and Officer Kyle D. Freytag, 2 officers who bravely defended the Capitol both during and after the protests on January 6. Psaki said at the time, their deaths is a sad reminder of the shameful day in our country's history and of the physical and mental scars left on the officers who risked their lives to protect our Capitol and our democracy. If you have thoughts of suicide, confidential help is available for free at the National Suicide Prevention Line. Call 1-800-273-8255. The line is available 24 hours every day. So if you're suicidal, please call this number. Please, please. But what happened on January 6th at the Capitol was not a riot. I don't think it meets the certain requirements of a riot. I think it was an unlawful assembly. It was an unlawful entry of the Capitol, but it wasn't a riot. Unfortunately, the only person that was killed was Ashli Babbitt. She wasn't just killed, she was murdered by an officer who would not be charged, which is a shameful act. And I 100% support defunding the police officer who murdered Ashli Babbitt. With that being said, leave a comment down below. What are your thoughts on the whole people in politics in Washington, D.C. gumming it up for the television, saying that this was the worst event since Pearl Harbor and 9/11? You know who I'm talking about. You're talking about the Joe Bidens, the Let's Go Brandon, the Nancy Pelosi's, and the ilk, leave a comment down below if you find their words disgraceful. And please smash the like and subscribe button on any and all platforms or just the platform that you're currently watching. But most importantly, have yourself a wonderful day, morning, or evening.